here we are, trucking still, and really not much has changed. The only, decisions to be made are, once a selection has already been made about which city to try to get a load to, which destination, and that, of course, all depends on purely on supply and demand, and some of that's seasonal as different regions and states have their exports, spiking. Um, so really, that's driven by the rates um, that trucks are offered by brokers, who are the middleman between the shipper and the receiver, who are selling a truckload of product to each other, and then the broker secures a truck to move it. So beyond choosing where to go, the decision that's left really boils down to when and where to stop, and along which route, which route to take. Sometimes there's multiple routes that could be very similar distance, but it isn't even just about the distance. It's about the time and the terrain. The amount of elevation change has a huge role on driver fatigue and fuel consumption. So probably my least favorite state, for example, out of all of them, is West Virginia. I just absolutely, totally abhor the state of West Virginia. It could fall off the map and become a black hole. I would not, and no one would miss it. It's a totally useless, utterly horrible state. There's never, ever a reason. I will not go through West Virginia ever again, period. You couldn't pay me enough to go through West Virginia. It's the worst state. It is definitively the worst state. It's worse than the northeastern states. All the, major urban areas, it's worse. Definitely worse. And it's because you never get through it. It's like every single mountain you come over the top of, and then you've got to use the Jake brake and apply some light braking pressure on the way back down, because that weight's pushing you. You're trying not to lose control. You're trying to keep the speed at a reasonable level. It's like all you're doing is fighting the mountains, and every single one just back to back is 6-7% grades. You just never ever get through it. So that in that particular area, if you're going to any destination that lies on either end of West Virginia, you're pretty much screwed. That's the way. The only other way through the mountains is I-40 in Tennessee, and that's a far better route. A fraction of the actual amount in feet of elevation change. I mean, it isn't about the elevation that you reach, the maximum height or altitude. It's about the steepness of the grades, the sharpness of the curves, the amount of traffic that's all trying to force its way through there, and how much of that momentum and energy is lost simply being dissipated through the brakes as heat. That's a tremendously inefficient and wasteful way to use energy, and it's expensive. So it literally doesn't make economic sense to go through West Virginia. You're just subjecting yourself as a driver to this torture of up and down these long, steep grades. I mean, these hills are so long. A lot of times you can get a running start at one, and that energy will bleed off as you're starting to get toward the crest, and then you can come back down, and a lot of times you can still stay in one of your top gears and watch your RPMs come down, and as long as you're not lugging the engine and putting undue stress on, the internals, the crankshaft, the bearings, as long as you're keeping the RPMs high enough that you're not accelerating, the wear on the engine, you can let the RPMs come down quite a bit without having to drop a gear. So The problem in West Virginia is every single of these very steep inclines is so long that you're going to drop multiple gears just to try to pull your way to the top. And Tennessee's way different. I mean, it's I'm sure, on Google Maps or some other mapping software, there's a way that you can figure out exactly the amount of elevation change, going up and down each of these hills between two, whatever the endpoints are. But I would say it's probably a quarter of the amount of elevation change going through Tennessee as opposed to West Virginia. The other problem with West Virginia is the toll roads. Oh, and they're crappy roads too. It's just a series of potholes you're trying to dodge the entire time. And you're paying for the privilege. And on top of that, at each of those 3 toll booths on, I think it's Interstate 64, traffic is coming to a complete stop. So how much sense does that make? Humanity likes to think of itself as having advanced so far, yet on some of these basic, super simple things, we still fall flat on our face. We are a totally inept species. No wonder aliens haven't visited us. They've observed us and realized we are a primitive, inferior life form and not worth them making their presence known. So, gosh, I really don't blame them. Look at ourselves. We got all this 70 mile an hour momentum going, and then we're going to slam the brakes 3 times in a row at each of these toll booths and wait for the articulating arm to rise as your transponder on the dash communicates with the toll booth to deduct the toll amount from your account. It isn't even about the money involved, which is, by the way, it's as I recall, it's $14.50 or maybe it was $12.50 at each toll booth. So if you're doing a round trip out and back from anywhere that is going to be going through West Virginia, I mean, so that's $80 just in tolls for the privilege of using their busted up roads. So if we could just eliminate and cut off West Virginia, that'd be great. It does not serve a purpose. And one of the funny things, one of the things that really caught my eye on probably a year ago, getting through West Virginia, right at the approach to one of the toll booths, there was an advertisement billboard that was for a local flight school, and saying, gosh, I forget what the wording was, but the point was, don't stop doing this to yourself. You need to get over there to the other side of the mountains. Just fly. You'd be there already. You'd be there and back already. By the time you drive, holy crap, it takes a quarter, less than that of the time. I mean, you're going in a straight line at triple the speed. No stop lines, no traffic. Of course, you've got to watch for weather, but, poof, you're there. 45 minutes, you're there, wherever you're going. So, for someone who's making that type of a journey regularly, at a certain point, they could make a case for why, you need to rent this Cirrus SR22 and just appear there at the destination. Don't have to do all this fighting traffic. So yeah, that's West Virginia. But anyway, right now, the reason I got onto that little rant about West Virginia and how useless as it is because currently I'm going through the state of Tennessee and thinking about where to fuel and looking at the fuel prices on my fuel card app. So On this particular journey, I opted to go around Nashville. It's slightly more miles, but way less aggravation, far less traffic density. And we're going to be keeping the speed up, so it's probably a little bit less time. Definitely less risky, Traffic is spaced out enough that you don't get these massive clusters of a dozen trucks, all tailgating each other. You don't get that on this particular loop around an urban area like this. So 840 around Nashville is often, unless it's like off hours, if it's the middle of the night, then, no big deal. I'll just go straight through. But a lot of times it's really worth the, negligible additional distance to just go around, just skip all the nonsense. You're going to save yourself the aggravation and pop out on the other side. So here shortly I'm going to grab some fuel. It's been 1,303 miles since my last fill up, and we've burned 192 gallons, averaging 6.7 miles per gallon. So diesel's, I forget at the moment the exact figure. I think it's around 7.1. Yeah, I think it is 7.1 pounds per gallon. So gonna take on like 220-ish gallons. So 1,500 pounds of fuel. And this current load's 37,000 pounds for 33,000 pounds empty, truck and trailer. So easily within the well under maximum weight of 80,000, even with full fuel, which sometimes that's not the case. That there's a load that's so heavy that you've got to be kind of careful about when and where you fuel and how much of it you're going to burn before you get to the weigh stations. And it isn't even just about the maximum gross weight. Each axle has, a maximum allowable weight, which is 34,000 on the trailer tandems, 34,000 on the tractor drives, 12,000 on the tractor steer axle, and the fifth wheel and on the back of the truck, as well as the tandems under the trailer, are able to slide by unlocking pins that are usually air actuated and then redistributing the weight. So we're 4.5 miles from getting off 840 back onto 40, taking the south loop around Nashville, just bypassing the mess. It's just nice not to have to deal with the hordes, the very likely impaired and definitely distracted motorists in the typical, American city. So an economic crash and spike of fuel prices would actually keep a lot of people from going places needlessly, and it would actually make things a lot more civil if we have transportation suddenly becoming, unattainably expensive. That would filter out a lot of the unnecessary trips and cut down on the road rage, the aggression. We need this crash. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, for God's sakes, let's do this thing already. Let's bring it. Let's get on with this thing. There's a bunch of us, and I mean a bunch of us who are ready for it. Bruh, we're going to come out the other side better. We're going to be even stronger as a result of this economic implosion. Bring it. Yo, you think the economic forum is going to impose its will? Negative. And that's that. So you need to, those supporters or participants in that that particular brand of evil need to get with the program and give it up. Just stop it. You're gonna lose. Don't pick a fight that you're not able to win. Don't do this to yourself. Don't cause us to have to defend ourselves against you. Don't do it. Don't do that to yourself. We don't want to have to do that to you. We the people are so strong, so strong. And the thing is, freedom and truth and integrity and personal responsibility, if these things are good, if they're built into our foundational documents from the formation and the founding of this particular country, if they're so good that we should retain them, then they're good enough that we should enforce them upon our own politicians, and we should spread freedom. I mean actual freedom, not just, enriching our weapons manufacturers, shareholders. I mean exporting actual freedom to the rest of the globe. And the thing is that some of those terms get tossed around, and their meaning has been lost. You can't tell people who know they're not free that they're free while you're plundering their assets. You can't get away with that. So accountability is approaching, and I've been talking about that for a long time, and I still think that the ship is able to be salvaged, and the some of the damage can be repaired and it can be refloated. It doesn't have to be scuttled. A lot of the ideas that once were valued in as the USA grew should be kept. Some of them have been learning experiences. I mean, there are some. What I mean is that there are some dark chapters of our history that should be learned from and made absolutely sure not to be repeated. But in order to learn from our history, we have to make sure not to delete or omit any sections of our history. So, this experiment, of course, is still ongoing. And we've lost our way significantly. We are now equally oppressed, if not more, than those who fled Europe in order to form a new country. So, and the entire time we're being told about how free we are, and that justification is used to bomb those with unacceptable viewpoints who might oppose being oppressed by our own politicians. In the current world, we are not the good guys. The economic hitman, Snowden. There have been many who've revealed and confirmed these facts. It's not theory. It's indisputable, facts. We are not the good guys on the global stage. We've done some horrible things. Why do you think people are trying to retaliate against us? And it isn't even us as the population, it's our corrupt politicians who, in that way, we're actually got quite a bit in common. We don't like our own corrupt politicians either. So if freedom is such a good thing, if truth and freedom and accountability are such good things, let's start right here. Let's start right now. Let's start at home before we start falsely throwing those terms around as justification to enslave other peoples around the world. Because they, in fact, are not our enemies. Our enemies are those who are trying to persuade us into thinking that we are each other's enemies. Humanity around the globe needs to unite and hold its politicians accountable. because they will not do it themselves. And this is what we were warned of by the founders of this country, is that this day would come. So let's get ready for it. Let's keep preparing ourselves physically, mentally, spiritually, keep stacking, acquiring new skills, and examining history. You know, don't let an implosion of, everything that we've grown to be dependent on be a shock and a surprise. We've known this was coming. So, we've got pipelines being sabotaged, everyone pointing fingers at each other. Ukraine is applying supposedly for membership in NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, I think. I forget the acronym. But so anyway, assuming that goes forward, then it'll no longer be a proxy war or a soft war. It'll be potentially continuing rather to escalate, and it'll be undeniable. It'll be in our face, So that's kind of like the inevitable conclusion that we're hurtling towards. Neither side, and there's more than just two sides, and there's even factions within those sides, but that's the trajectory that we've already been put on course towards, and there's no off ramp. I mean, this is unlikely to have an outcome other than terrible conflict. And that happens periodically throughout history, so we shouldn't think that we today are somehow unique or better or different or insulated from the reoccurrence of history. Humanity is brutal and just vile and horrible, and we need what's it called? We need truth. We need compassion. We need to treat each other a little better, and we need to make sure that we're confident of our forgiveness from sin. That assurance of salvation. That when we're judged for our lives, that will be our sins will be forgiven. So, certain parts of history are there are those who are trying to rewrite and suppress history, and that's not going to work, because there's those of us who will not permit it. And when that day comes and we finally have this clash, dude, bring it. We're gonna win. Because we're the good guys. We're on the right side of history. I mean, history will grant us, will look on us and say, these were the guys who were doing the right thing, even if in the moment during the writing of that history, it may not have been clear who was right. But if we're making our decisions based on truth, we're going to be right. But throughout history, conflicts have unfolded with both sides being equally positive that they're doing the right thing. Both sides have propaganda that people can either reject or latch on to. Even if you know something's false, you can believe in it if you like what it allows you to think. Sometimes both sides are wrong. In the American Civil War of 1861 through 65, cotton was considered king because it made plantation owners and states of the South wealthy, but the freedom that they were seeking was the freedom to enslave others, to deprive others of their freedom. We want to be free to deprive others of their freedom, so, words can be twisted and misused, and people will buy into it if it's beneficial to them, even if they know it's not true. They'll prefer that belief, and they won't let it go, And it's unfortunate that the main driving cause of that particular conflict was described as states' rights, when in reality it was the states' rights to deprive a particular race of their freedom. If it hadn't been for that particular component of the argument, states' rights would be worthwhile of defending, because the states should be able to push back against federal overreach and prevent themselves from being taken advantage of or exploited, but with the greed of those who were benefiting from ownership of slaves, defending their actions by describing them as being states' rights, or that our economy is based on cotton and cotton is king, it's dishonest, and it ruins the argument of states' rights. There's going to be a difficult time, resuscitating that actually valid argument of states' rights because of what was done. And really, it was tolerated in the revolution against the British, and set into motion that eventual conflict. 80 years later, it had to be resolved one way or another. So, delaying that debate just kicked the can down the road, and both sides were arming up, and every time a new state was admitted to the Union, that balance of power shifted between free and slave states, and various compromises emerged out of that just made it worse. So more casualties were incurred by both sides in that struggle than every other war combined. So what can we learn from that? What can we do to prevent something like that from ever happening again? I think it starts with being truthful. Even if it means you're wrong, even if it means you've got to change your ways and make some sacrifices, it's important to be making your decisions and taking actions that are based only in truth. Trying to pull this hill right now, 1500 RPM, 32 PSI boost pressure, 180 degree Fahrenheit water temperature, 210 oil temperature, primary secondary air pressures 110 PSI. Everything is normal. We're good. Pulling up here at 48 miles an hour, 3% grade. '40 east. About to be getting into the hills, 770 foot elevation currently. 388 miles. It's Charlotte. Just crested over this hill. Let off the throttle in 9th, dropped it back down into 10th. RPM's back to 1150. 54 miles an hour coming down this hill. Let momentum speed us up. No reason to burn fuel. coming down a hill, the hill itself will speed us up. We're at 60. We haven't touched the throttle. So, the name of the game in trucking is efficiency over a long enough period of time that your average you make enough on these loads that you can budget or at least try to prepare for some unforeseen mechanical failures and try to stay on top of swapping components that are beginning to wear before they catastrophically, spectacularly fail. So it's all about controlling the things that are within your ability to control, like fuel efficiency, 6.7 miles per gallon for an old truck like this is actually pretty good. And the advantage of an old truck, this old iron, is that it is unencumbered by the emissions systems that are so highly unreliable of new trucks. I talk to drivers all the time, and I've experienced myself brand new trucks, with 5,000 miles just breaking down and being on the side of the road. There's nothing you can do about it. The computer goes stupid and some sensors are faulting, and that's it. You're getting towed off the side of the road with a brand new truck, and it happens, a lot, all the time. I used to tow. I used to be a wrecker operator, and would pull brand new trucks off the side of the road. Their emission sensors became unhappy, and the problem isn't just the inefficiency of losing those loads or being late on the delivery or getting towed, which can be thousands of dollars. But then you get to the shop and they say, oh, we're a week behind, can't even look at it. Then they pull it in and say, oh, parts, the sensor or this wiring harness is nationally back ordered. We can get it maybe in a month. So you got brand new equipment you're making payments on, just stranded at shops. It does not work. You can't run an operation like that. So that's why everyone's rebuilding these old trucks and telling California to go F themselves. You're going to suffer some very real economic repercussions from the policies you enact that are simply not compatible with reality. You're going to have people fleeing in droves from your state to the point that you can't even get a rental truck out of some of those blue states. You think you're selling this lie that you're saving the planet. BS. You're not saving anything. It's not up to you. It isn't within. That's a lie. That's your attempt to inflict and exercise control over the population and brainwash them. You're not saving anyone. Creation isn't yours to save. You are unable to save it. We're hurtling through space right now. Okay? All the conditions necessary for life aren't up to us, aren't even within our ability to continue or to sustain, The fact that we exist proves that we can't create or perpetuate our own existence. So that's just simply false. That we're going to slightly reduce our carbon footprint on our output of emissions and prevent ourselves from overheating. Nonsense. Okay? That's a lie. And that, the sea level's rising however many millimeters on average per decade. So we better make sure no one except our politicians can purchase these beachfront properties. Just stop it, okay? Knock it off. We, the people, are going to reassert ourselves and hold you accountable against your protests, because we will be acting in truth and our actions will be justified. Don't fight it, You're the one doing the wrong thing. Our victory is inevitable. There is nothing new under the sun. People have always and will always continue to attempt to mistreat each other and subjugate each other. Always. You see it everywhere. You see it on the large scale and on the small scale. Employers, roommates, families, people, cities, countries, the entire planet. Everyone's fighting, jockeying for position. And it's not good to take advantage of people, and you can't let yourself be taken advantage of. If you know someone's lying to you, put your foot down, stand up to them, and tell them no. What are you going to do about it? You attempt to retaliate for someone doing the right thing, all you're going to do is expose yourself and rally 100 more. It's like you chop off the head of the snake and a dozen more pop into its place. Like, once this thing starts, our victory will be assured because we're the ones making the right decisions, period. And there's a lot of people who are going to be disappointed with the outcome of the consequences of their actions, but they'll have only themselves to blame. It isn't just the politicians, it's the segments of our society that have fully embraced evil, that are supporting them and empowering them and refusing to hold them accountable. That's the masses that we find ourselves amongst in everyday life. Driving like jerks. The way people drive says a lot about them as a person. If you're precise and measured, cautious, or if you're needlessly exposing others to hazards. Trust me, you don't want computers out here making these split-second decisions. Life and death decisions. One of the autonomous, experimental truck manufacturers recently, Too Simple, TUSIMPLE, recently had a road test go horribly wrong. The truck decided in traffic as we're going down, as it was, bringing its two occupants down the highway, it was going to override their control inputs and veer hard to the left and slammed into the wall. So, good thing computers never make errors or have blue screens of death or anything like that. Good thing that they're 100% reliable and then never need to reset going down the road. So I think the occupation of, truck driving will be secure for a very, very long time. Just activated the Jake brake, restricts the exhaust gases to slow down the engine and hold this weight back coming down hills. Now starting to pull up the other side. 10th gear currently. 62 miles an hour. Got it floored. Making 2.7 miles per gallon currently. There's an instantaneous MPG, display on the dash that, based on the throttle position and the speed, it'll output your momentary MPGs. So that's kind of handy, actually, sometimes, just to, at a glance, see how hard you're pulling, how heavily the equipment is exerting itself. And coming off the top of each next crest of the hill, I just coast down and then build up a little steam coming into the next hill. But made it all the way up that hill just now, staying in 10th. So those hills are nice when you don't have to downshift. Downshifting is a big loss of efficiency because 10th gear is useful down to about 55 miles an hour, and below that, we're getting under 1200 RPM. It's time to downshift to ninth. And that time of downshifting, you take your foot off the throttle and pop the transmission into neutral, then rev up the engine and slam it into ninth. It's floating gears. Very rarely is the clutch ever used after getting the truck rolling from a stop. So in ninth, 1600 RPM, pulling hard up a hill, we're burning a heck of a lot of fuel, and sometimes that's unavoidable. You just have to do that, but way better if you can build up some momentum at the base, toward the base of the hill, and hit it hard and let that momentum bleed off and carry you up to the top of the hill without downshifting. It's way, way more efficient. Hang on to some of that speed, but don't let it get so slow that it lugs the engine. Then you can end up staying in 10th most of the time and just accelerating and pulling up each hill and then let off and cruise. Just coast down. So yeah, humanity needs to reevaluate the confidence and the trust that it puts into various institutions, especially its politicians, making false promises. I think a lot of people are about to be disappointed with the systems they've paid into their whole lives. Federal taxes suddenly are, going to be going belly up. There's this 27, however many now trillions of dollars of debt there is, and there's no intention or even the ability for that ever to be paid back. So we're basically going broke, and this isn't the only country in that predicament. I mean, irresponsibility at the highest levels has very real consequences. And it'll really result in an erosion of confidence and trust, and potentially, though, maybe on the positive side, a return to local control over finances. Each state, has a lot more to lose. Certainly, each individual and each house has a lot more to lose. So imagine having, I would have to look up what the annual GDP of the USA is, but that level of debt compared, translated to an individual, that's a tremendous debt load, and the interest payments on that can be really crippling and prevent someone from growing in their careers and their lives. And if you're so burdened with debt, you can't invest into other areas. You can't cause growth to occur if you're deeply indebted. You can't purchase equipment or make improvements to efficiency in other areas. So the debtor is slave to the lender. So yeah, that's about all I've got for now. Trucking through Tennessee. Humanity needs to hold their politicians accountable. Those are my parting thoughts. See ya.